kind of want to get into a couple of questions that I feel like you're the best person maybe in the world to answer. So the first one is how does our monetary system enslave us?
It's very simple. Like one of the major ways that it does it, it actually uses debt. So when people get into debt, you got to go and get a job to get, pay back that debt. The problem with like how it really enslaves us and how it steals our assets and so over time, and how the bankers actually can, take back those assets for next to nothing from you is by, of course, when you let's go to the basics. So like let's say I have only $100 in the world, and I'm gonna borrow them to you. Well, I'm gonna want to charge you an interest because I was like, okay, well, it's gonna take my money. I want it to work for me, so I want to charge an interest. Well, the problem is when that is the only $100 in the world, I want to charge you an interest. Where are you going to get the interest payment from? Like, I want the principal, which is the $100 plus the interest, but the interest doesn't exist in money. So either you would go bankrupt and you would have to give me whatever you created, or you would have to get another loan from me, basically, from that little amount of, what you call it, interest. And then again, you would have to borrow that, but then with interest again. So like it's an ever-ending Ponzi scheme where like you always have more interest in circulation than actually like the money that can actually pay it off. So it's basically a Ponzi scheme that we live in, and you need to always feed in more people, and that's why a lot of countries that are struggling with demographics right now, like Germany, most of the Western countries actually, they are trying to get mass immigration going so they could actually get more debtors. The problem is like when I did a report in 2019 that I worked on for 2020, and one of the things that I looked at there was actually, so what does the average person like have for assets in their portfolio? And it actually showed me that so like the lower middle class to the poorer people, they have 50 to 60% of their retirement, supposed retirement, is in real estate. So basically their main home that they live in, which is, I don't even know what to say about that. I'm like in the boat where Robert Kiyosaki, I don't know if you know the saying that your house is not an asset. Not until you sell it, at least for a profit. Or you
in
actually
fact,
can
Robert
make cash
Kiyosaki
flow.
has recently been on some Hex streamers shows.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So it's like the thing is, if you believe that something is an asset that can't give you a return, like you're pretty much insane, and then relying on that like for your retirement is very dangerous. Like believing that, oh yeah, prices will always go up in real estate. Meanwhile, like they could actually, plummet 50 to 80%. It's happened before. And especially now with like the insanity that's going on. And on top of that, we have the eviction moratoriums, just getting extended in the United States. So that's another big pressure that is coming in now, where all these like gunked up demand of, who knows if it's ever going to be paid back. The mortgages for the investors, like through the rent, or like the people that actually did, extend their payments on the mortgages. There's a lot of people that did it. And my bank has been all over me trying to like get me to like just basically extend my payments. So it's like, oh yeah, you don't have to pay your interest or whatever, or even your payments for months. But I wouldn't do that. But they've been
I know people who've done like cash buybacks and stuff on their homes.
So it's pretty insane times. And then with these moratoriums, like, so what if the people, like, are they going to ever get that money paid back that they owe for the last year and a half? I don't think that's going to happen. Like they might do what California just did, use $5 billion of COVID money to actually bail out the landlords. Because if they don't bail out the landlords would default on their mortgages, and then the mortgage-backed securities that the Federal Reserve is buying a crap ton of, the derivative that blew up in 2008, creating the global financial crisis, those are going to blow up. And then we have corporate derivatives. So all the corporate real estate, like what's happened with COVID, like all this remote work, like are they ever going to come back to the downtowns as we know them with all these corporate offices? That might not even happen. So they might start to default on their debt. And so like they're in a massive losing battle. Like the Federal Reserve and the government is trying to manipulate everything by, first of all, like by pushing interest rates down to zero. Then second, doing all these spending programs that, they had both corporate bailouts and so on. What I think it has been, like COVID-19 has just been a massive cover-up of the global financial crisis on steroids.
Sure, and you've been saying that from the beginning, because I was working for Tim and Luke and you really when this all started, at the beginning of this.
Yeah, it's basically been like the best cover ever for the massive bailout. Nobody's angry at the corporations this time. Like there's no what was it? Occupy Wall Street movement is not there. There's Black Lives Matter and all this equality stuff, but nobody's talking about the worst inequality that exists in the world, and it's that one created by the central banks. And like you gotta love how they come out. It's like we fight for equality. It's like they're actually the biggest creator of inequality in the world when they print all this money, and then whoever is sitting on top of the pyramid getting all that free money for next to 0% interest, they're the ones getting rich. Meanwhile, us as slaves, we have to, get anywhere from 5 to thousands of % in interest on either payday loans or credit cards or high interest loans. So it's like an interest rate apartheid that you're looking at. So it's this whole Ponzi scheme is really like in a lot of trouble. And then they're talking about, like, oh, we're going to taper. And tapering basically means that they're going to try to sell back the asset that they bought from the insolvent banks. So basically, we're going to give you back these terrible assets that they gave us, these derivatives or treasuries. And then, everybody's going to accept them. But that didn't work out too well back in when was it now? I think it was 2016 to 17. So you got what we'll call the taper tantrum, and then that turned into the repo crisis. So the overnight lending markets between banks collapsed on September 17, 2019. And nobody talked about that at all at the time. Like I know me and Tim were covering that and said like, hey, watch this. There's something really wrong with the financial markets. And sure enough, on March 2020, they blamed the government lockdowns. They blamed COVID. They didn't blame the government lockdowns.
Right. But the lockdowns were a result. Yeah.
Yes. So like it was baked in there, but nobody was talking about that. This is really like what has happened is the biggest bailout ever of banks. It was like quadruple the amount almost of the last bailout. And they kept on like giving them the trash assets, these derivatives that they created out of thin air, that doesn't really have any value because they are just basically, they give you a little bit of an interest payment on an underlying asset of an underlying asset of an underlying asset. So it's nothing really there other than like other than fake assets, and of course. Warren Buffett called it, financial weapons of mass destruction, these derivatives. And they've been bought up. Like actually the U.S. Federal Reserve owns almost 30% of all mortgages through these derivatives that they purchased.
Well, and now they're starting to do derivatives within crypto projects with like bringing on, within DeFi, and they're starting to bring on like, liquid staking protocols. And, like while I theoretically like the idea of being able to use staked assets while they earn interest to, accumulate other wealth, I'm like, wait a second. that isn't working. Like, that's part of the problem. Really tie into what you've just been saying. So you're saying, like, there's, massive, imbalance, and some of it has to do with the problem of really centralization, because the rich are the only people who are able to use their assets to accumulate more, while the poor have to borrow from them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not exactly how it is, but it's like the banksters are there. Like they are the ones that, the people that they deem as having the best credit worthiness, which is the ones
Sure.
that have all the assets. They get near 0%, while we as deemed as higher risk, you get three till thousands of percent, depending on how bad they deem you to score on the credit rating. Now I'm not for like I'm not against, that it's riskier to borrow, to lend money to somebody that, doesn't know what they're doing, of course. So maybe that, like a little bit of higher interest is, should be applied if you dare to actually use your own money to lend it to somebody that you deem as a higher risk when it comes to either create a business or doing something to give you a return on it. But if you actually do have somebody with a good track record, you would more likely lend money to them. That the problem is, though, is that with the current system is now with the restrictions there, they're trying to stop like all this lending and speculation. Well, who do they stop? Well, they stop, of course, like the Joe Bag of Donuts or whoever is investing themselves. Meanwhile, BlackRock and Blackstone and all these hedge funds, they're buying exorbitant amounts of real estate in the U.S. right now that they buy. And then you, as a peasant, are now like, the bank is your landlord, basically, through these hedge funds. Like a hedge fund is your landlord. And a lot of people this was back in 2008 too, this happened, because all the people that defaulted on their mortgages, they lost their house, but then they were able to rent back again. But then Blackstone or BlackRock or any of these big hedge funds, they bought it and then lend it back to them. So
Yep.
they were making the money,
Yep.
of course, on these things. So it's and then of course talking about derivatives, the ETFs that they're trying to push, like for example Bitcoin ETFs. Look where ETFs for silver and gold is. The manipulation of these assets, where they have exorbitant amount of more assets like paper in circulation and physical underlying assets, and they're trying to do the same thing with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, where they have these ETFs, and it's like, oh, look over here, here's the price of Bitcoin. It's not the actual spot price that it should be, based upon like how you find like actually how a cryptocurrency is valued. You just simply take like market capitalization in fiat currency that flowed into the asset, then you divide it by coins or tokens in circulation, and voila, you have the Bitcoin price. Anybody could go and do that right now, and they'll figure out that, oh, yeah, that's exactly what like the average price is at CoinMarketCap, for example. It's a big problem with these banks. Are trying to come in and create these like derivatives of things, and then trying to tell us that, oh, this should be the real price, not the Bitcoin price that is deemed by actually a free market, because it is today. Like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are mostly being valued by physical actual free market free market valuations.